Hello, my name is Alexa Ferrari, and I am a graduate student at Arkansas State University. And currently, in one of my classes, we are working on an instructional plan, and I wanted to discuss that instructional plan with you today. So, this instructional plan that I'm working on is a lesson plan that is meant for one of my students who I'm currently working with. He is a student in third grade, and he has a cognitive impairment. Even though he's in third grade, he is working at about a first or kindergarten level. So this lesson plan today is going to focus on math, and it will be targeted at the first grade level. So the goal of this, so we will be focusing on using the greater than and less than symbols, using up to 2-digit numbers, so up to number 50. So the first objective that I have for this student is to be able to use the greater than and less than symbols for numbers between 1 and 50. Then I also want the student to be able to read a phrase using the greater than and less than symbol. So for example, being able to say 42 is greater than 31, or 31 is less than 42. And then the last objective that I would like for this child to meet is, but when given the closure activity, I would like the student to be able to complete the assignment, or it's an informal assessment, with 80% accuracy. So that's getting no less than 2 questions wrong. So continuing on with this lesson, I wanted to introduce or reintroduce some vocabulary words that will be provided and used throughout the lesson. And the first vocab word is greater than, and the way I will explain it is by saying is bigger than, which will be the easiest way. And then the second term is less than, or by telling the student is smaller than. When looking at this specific student, he struggles with fine motor skills and using a pencil. He's able to write his own name, but a lot of the times when he's writing, his words are illegible, and he does not have those fine motor skills. So with that being said, instead of using the greater than or less than symbol, being able to do this, I would like to have him cut those out and paste them to the correct spot. And I will kind of show you those later on when I show you the worksheet and how that will work. Moving on to the instructional resources that will be used for this lesson. There's a work mat that will be used, and it looks like this. So it says is greater than, is less than. So that's the first part. And then I have number tiles that the child will be using to put in these spots right here. And then we have scissors and we have glue. So for the anticipatory set, or the warm-up, I will review with the student the symbols and what they mean. So is greater than and is less than. And then I will use the analogy of the alligator. So we'll kind of, I'll have him practice opening up his hand like this and saying is greater than or is less than, or vice versa. And then we'll kind of refer to it as an alligator's mouth being open, and how an alligator always wants to eat the bigger number. That's the way that I'll explain it. I think that'll be the easiest way for him to understand it because he loves animals. So after the anticipatory set is done, I will give him this, like I showed you before, this work mat, and it says is greater than and is less than. So what the child will need to do is cut out number tiles, or actually the number tiles will be cut out for him ahead of time. And then I will ask him to pull out 2 numbers that he recognizes that are less than 20, and then he will have to put them, we'll start with the is greater than, and then he'll have to put them in the correct spot. So for example, 2, and then he could put 1 over here. And then so we'll go through that, and then after that, I would like him to be able to read 2 is greater than 1. So we'll practice that about 4 or 5 times. And after I think he's been successful at that, we'll move on to the is less than. And that same thing will apply, just going backwards and using the is less than. Okay, and we'll kind of discuss how, it's opened up, and alligator, when it's opened up first towards the left, that alligator will want to eat the bigger number. So once that's done, from when working on the numbers 1 through 20, we'll then move on to the numbers 30 through 50, which the child has had some exposure, or has had a lot of exposure working on those numbers, and he can read them. But I do want to kind of reinforce how 30 digits in the 30s are smaller than the 40s and the 50s, and then 50s are bigger than 40s and 30s. And then I want to reinforce that if you see a 2-digit number such as 32, and you see another number like 33, that even though they have the same digits in the tens place, then you would move on to the ones place and see which one is smaller or bigger. So we'd probably work on that strategy just by going over place value a little bit more. And then we would, once I think the child is ready, we would move on to numbers 30s in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we'll practice putting them on the top. So is greater than, and then as mentioned before, he would have to read it. So for example, 42. If you put 42 and then 34 here, he would say 42 is greater than 34. So we practice that a couple of times, and then we'd also move on to the is less than symbol. And again, we would put numbers in there from 30, 40, or 50, and he would have to practice reading those using the is less than symbol. So again, that would take about, so between those two things, it would take about 20-ish minutes. And then moving on, after that, we would then do, once I thought he was ready and, really with a lot of repetition and understanding, we would then move on to the closure activity, which looks like this. And so what the child has to do is put the correct symbol, so is greater than or less than. They have to cut it out and paste it to the correct spot. Because like I said, the student tends to struggle with those fine motor skills and the pencil grip and being able to write those symbols. And he also enjoys cutting and gluing. So I think that this would be a good way to have him master that skill. So if he was able, I would be able to tell that he understood the concept if he got 8 or more of those correct. So what does that mean for the future? If he was able to get 8 or 10 of those correct, I would then move on to higher numbers. So I might start focusing on 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then even moving on to 3-digit numbers. Now the 3-digit numbers might take a while, just because he's unable to read them right now. But I think eventually, with a lot of repetition and practice, he would be able to do that. But right now, I'd probably stay within the double-digit numbers. But I'd move on to 60s, 70s, or 80s, break it up into chunks because it's not too overwhelming for him. What does it mean if the student doesn't get 8 or more correct on this assessment? I would probably reteach these skills, break it down a little bit further, do a lot more practice with place value and the importance of place value and how we look in the tens place. And essentially 23 is 2 10s and 3 1s, and kind of break it up that way. So I think this will be a great activity to work on with my student, just because he loves cutting and pasting and he loves animal references. So thank you for listening, and have a great day.